All right, everybody, welcome in. Week 2, FSM Football Sunday is live. It is good to be with you guys today on this Sunday morning. And we actually have a special guest with us for the entirety of the show from Fantasy Insiders. He is an outstanding follow on the tweet machine at JayhawkChalk89. It's our buddy Nate Coleman. What's going on, man?
What's going on, Heist? Thanks for having me, man.
Well, thanks for being here. Nate is an outstanding follow on Twitter, as I mentioned. He's a contributor to Fantasy Insiders and also the commissioner of the Fantasy Sports Podcast League. And that's been a little bit of an eye-opener for you. All the different podcasts from across the industry all getting together, and you, my friend, are in charge of all of it. What made you decide that this was a project that you wanted to take on?
Well, I'm a fantasy content consumer and I love podcasts, so I thought, what better way than to start a league and invite some of my favorite podcasts on and just fight it out for supremacy.
Yeah, we're doing it through Fantrax, which is a great new site to play season long. And we'll get to some of our plays. Like I said, on this show, it is the most interactive fantasy show. We want to be able to try and provide for you guys. Any questions you have is always going to be available for you. We want this to be an interactive show. We want this to be something that you guys are constantly a part of. So we'll monitor our Facebook Live sites. We'll make sure that we are on the tweet machine as well, taking some of your questions. So be sure to join us for that. We're with you all hour long today. So if you have any questions, go ahead and leave them for us in the comments. We're going to be ready for you guys to take all of these different questions down. Before we get to that, though, Nate, I was telling you about our site, Fantasy Sports Markets, just a little while ago, and I'll go ahead and put it on the screen. Promo code Homer, Homer, if you guys go to fantasysportsmarkets.com. There are so many NFL contests right now that we have with a bunch of overlay. So if you head on over there, www.fantasysportsmarkets.com, our $10 to bomb contest right now has 22 entries out of a possible 50. They'll start to fill up a little bit closer to kickoff today, but right now the overlay is insane. $200 to first, including a $50,000 perfect roster bonus. And so, Nate, like when you're playing on some of the other sites, basically, if you're trying to win the Millie Maker on another site, which I won't name, you basically have to have a perfect roster. But the difference is that you're playing with salary cap players. And so on our site, you can choose the players you want. So if you know that one game is going to go off and you want to have exposure to everybody, you don't have to worry about trying to fit them in based on the salary cap. So I know you've been looking at a couple different options and a couple different intriguing plays, but it's a lot easier to win these bonuses with us than trying to win some of the big money on some of the other sites.
Right, yeah, I'll tell you what, I'll spend nights just staying up trying to figure out a way to jam in all my favorite players on some of those other platforms out there, so it's kind of nice to jump on FSM and just pick who I want. I don't really have to worry about that.
Yeah, it makes it a lot easier. We're also doing pick 3 contests this week over for quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers. So, for example, let's say that you know that the Drew Brees and Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, maybe not this week, but most week, those are usually the 3 guys that you want to target. All you got to do is just pick 3 guys, any 3 quarterbacks you want, and you're done. It'll take you just under a minute. And last but not least, we have the Beat Benny Heist competition. It's just $1. If your lineup scores higher than mine, then you win $2. So you have a chance to double up your money. First place takes home $10 over there as well. So this is going to be a lot of fun, a lot of exciting stuff going on for week number 2. And remember to get your questions in over at Fantasy Sports Markets on our Facebook feed, as well as on our streaming pages on Periscope and on Twitter as well. All right, man, you ready to get through some of these games?
Yeah, let's get to it.
Okay, let's start over with the Houston Texans and the Tennessee Titans. This game opened up with Houston being a 1-point favorite on the road. And as more news has started to come out, we started to see the spread move in favor of Houston. It's now back to 1.5, or excuse me, it's moved all the way up to -3.5 for Houston. Part of the reason is the news about Marcus Mariota, with information coming out today that he's going to try and play through an elbow injury and also an injury to his hand where, Nate, he doesn't have feeling in some of his fingers. So this is a serious situation for Mariota. How can you trust a guy if he can't even have feeling in his arms where he's throwing the football?
I mean, it's pretty simple. You don't trust the guy. They were saying he didn't have as much zip when he was throwing the ball this week as well, and they even talked about rotating quarterbacks. It's not college. The only time they talk about rotating quarterbacks is when you don't feel good about your starter.
Right.
And go figure, that same starter has been terrible this preseason. He was bad in the first game, so it's not a guy that I'm looking to add in any of my rosters.
I think the only person that's really in play, and initially I thought that there were two because I don't trust Houston's secondary a whole heck of a lot.
Sure.
I love Dion Lewis this week just because I think the volume is going to be insane. He outsnapped Derrick Henry, I think 70-30 last week. Even Henry was saying in his post-game interview that he was mad at how he played and he was frustrated with everything that happened the week before. I just don't see a situation against Deshaun Watson and DeAndre Hopkins and Lamar Miller that Derrick Henry is going to get a whole lot of opportunities and volume because I expect Tennessee to be playing from behind throughout most of the game.
Right. I mean, Henry is game script dependent no matter what. He's not going to be on the field if they're behind as much. And yeah, Lewis is the play for sure. You look at Houston, if Fuller does play, they tend to score a lot more points when Fuller is there. Just something about him and Watson together. They have like an ungodly touchdown rate when Fuller's in the game. So I think they'll cover the spread and then some.
Yeah, I think this is a game script that works really well for Houston. Like I said, the line has moved up a total of 2 points. But the over-under opened up at 45. It's gone all the way down to 41.5. So for those that were looking to target this game, that should be a bit of concern for you guys. What about somebody like Corey Davis, who is going to get a ton of volume, especially with no Delaney Walker? He's done for the season. I look at somebody like Corey Davis where I like him. I would have liked him a lot more if I felt better about Mariota. But do you still see volume going his way today?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to injury for him, and he's dealing with a hamstring injury right now. He dealt with the same hamstring injury last year, and then you couple that with Mariota being injured, the fact that they could be using a backup quarterback that they might not have as much chemistry with, and then they're also missing their left and right starting tackles.
That's
so
right.
It's not. I have Davis on a few of my leagues. I'm going to start him because he's a stud and he has a lot of potential. But for DFS, I mean, he's nothing more than probably a contrarian play.
Yeah, I think so too. And on the Houston side, I love Deshaun Watson in this game. Tennessee's defense was certainly impressive down the stretch of last season, but still a lot left to be desired for week 2. Watson is in a really good bounce back spot. I think a lot of people are killing him for a rough performance against New England. And the thing about the Patriots defense is that I know they've gotten burned and crushed over the last year or so, but they have a new defensive coordinator this year, Matt Patricia, leaving to go to Detroit. And think about all the time and preparation they were able to have. I mean, that's Bill Belichick's strong suit, is when you have time and ability to take away a team's biggest weapon. That's what he's able to do. And people will say, well, what about Kansas City in week 1 last year? I think Kansas City surprised everybody in that game.
Everyone in Kansas City was surprised.
Exactly. I think you're spot on. So, I think this is a great bounce back spot for Deshaun Watson. I'm not concerned about about DeAndre Hopkins missing a little bit of practice this week. I think he's going to be in a great spot. I think you could look at this Houston situation as a nice contrarian play with a little mini stack with Watson and I'm blanking out on his name, and DeAndre Hopkins. If you're looking for maybe to go away from, say, Pittsburgh and Kansas City, which is going to be probably the most popular stack of the day.
Yeah, I think people will be off of Houston and ownership will be down, especially on Watson. Watson wasn't good last week. I think a lot of people, they have recency bias, and they're not going to want to start him, but he's in a great spot. I mean, last year, if he can put up numbers like last year in a single game, you're looking at a winner for the week.
Yeah, I think so too. All right, let's continue on here on the slate. We'll go to the Colts and Washington. This game opened up as -5 for Washington at home. It has since been bet up to -6. And one of the games where the over-under has actually gone up a little bit from 47 to 48. Andrew Luck, post-game, said that it felt like he got run over by a train, which is exactly what Andrew Luck owners want to hear in this type of situation, coming back from a serious shoulder injury. But I thought they played well. I think Cincinnati has impressed a lot of people in these first couple of games of the season. And so looking at this matchup, I think Washington's defense is in a nice spot here. The Colts are not a very good team on the road. But I think Alex Smith and that offense is actually positioned very well in this game.
Yeah, I think so. The Colts defense is just they're garbage. I hate to say it. They're not good. They're going to get run over by a 33-year-old running back in a few hours, and it's not going to be pretty. You're talking about a Redskins offensive line that ranks in the top 10 by most metrics. I think they're going to roll them.
So you're big on Adrian Peterson again this week.
So I'm big on him this week. I actually am a closet Redskin fan. I'm not big that they added him, but I say roll with it while you can. But I think they match up well. Smith likes to target open receivers, and they got that in Crowder and Reed and Vernon Davis and Chris Thompson over the middle. And I think that's going to be their game plan again. They're going to get up same way they did with the Cardinals and then just run the ball.
I think it's going to be a good part of the game. I look at any time Adrian Peterson continues to get some momentum in the fantasy world that you should be trading him while his value will never be higher.
Oh, absolutely.
And a lot of people are saying, well, no, he's got an amazing matchup this week. And Colts are a bad defense, and they're gonna struggle against the run. But if anything, I think if I'm targeting this game, I'd rather look at Smith and Jordan Reed while he's still healthy. I think Jamison Crowder disappointed a lot of fantasy owners last week in a really good matchup against Arizona. I still expect him to lead this team in targets and receptions because he's such a perfect wide receiver to mix in with Alex Smith. He's going to run those short routes across the middle. He can run those out routes to the side, which Smith is very good at. And Chris Thompson is still a stud for this offense as well. And I fully expect as long as they can keep him healthy and limit his usage a little bit, that he's going to have an outstanding target share. That he's going to keep his yards per catch up. And I just look at everything with this Washington team, and I'm wondering why maybe not a lot of people are targeting them in DFS this week. Do you think it's maybe just the Alex Smith effect, and people don't like the idea of a quarterback that tends to play it on the more conservative side?
Yeah, exactly. I think there's just other high-scoring games, and people are kind of off of this one. But, I mean, Smith is definitely an option in cash games because he always has such a high floor with that kind of hidden rushing ability that he has. But he's not going to put up huge numbers ever. He doesn't throw to his outside receivers. And then on the flip side, I was going to say, who's in a great spot is the Colts tight ends. So yeah. Andrew Luck always has a lower depth of target, and he checks down a lot. And last year, the Redskins were terrible against tight ends. So I think Jack Doyle is actually in a really great spot, and maybe Eric Ebron if you're the poor guy who has to start him, I guess. But they're both in great spots against Washington. And then the other side of that is Washington was top 3 in pressure rate last year with a bad defense. Mm-hmm. So this year they're all healthy. They have 2 of their first-round draft picks back on the defensive line. So they're going to put a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and Luck's going to have to deal with that all game.
Yeah. Before we move on to some of the other games, let's take a couple of your Twitter questions. Over at FSM Contest at Benny Heiss. I saw that one has gone to Nate's direction as well. Let's go with Jason_Craft. He wants to know whether to play Ted Ginn or Deshaun Jackson today. Jackson he left the game with concussion protocol last week for the Bucs. And Malcolm Jenkins, in some of his pregame comments, made note of the fact that it's not Mike Evans that they're worried about. It's not Chris Godwin that they're worried about. It's Deshaun Jackson. They don't want to get beat deep. And so I think Ted Ginn probably is in a better situation with a better matchup. I know he missed some time in practice this week too, but I'd probably lean with Ginn just because I think the volume is likely to be there for the Saints, especially in a matchup against Cleveland. But what do you see between those two guys? Who do you like more?
Yeah, I mean, that's a crapshoot. I think Ginn would probably have more volume. You're talking about more targets.
Yes.
But I feel like in that other game, I think the Eagles are going to score a lot. I think the Bucs are going to be playing from behind. I know they looked great in their Week 1 matchup, but the Eagles have had 10 days to get ready for this game. They're more healthy than they were before, so I can see Jackson being involved when they're playing from behind in a negative game script.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. We got a question on our Facebook page. Facebook.com/fantasy sports markets. This is from Brandon. Do you go with Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers? Both have tough defenses today. Is Rodgers too hurt to show up against Minnesota? I wish I could avoid both of these games, to be completely honest with you, because Brady is going to Jacksonville against arguably the best pass defense in the league. And Rodgers is at home, which is encouraging, but I was listening to the Daily Fantasy Edge podcast, and they were joking about how much pain medicine that Rodgers was on.
Oh, he was doped up.
He was totally doped up. But I mean, listen, it didn't impact him, especially in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
So I'm probably going with Brady today because I still know that he's healthy. And I still think he can target the short passing game really well. Assuming Rex Burkhead is able to go, I think he's in a good spot. I think James White is always a nice option for him. And you know that you can always trust Gronk in the red zone with Brady. So I don't particularly love either of them, even though they're the two stud quarterbacks pretty much every week. So I'm leaning Brady, but what about you?
Yeah, I like Brady on the road. You don't have to worry about health concerns. Obviously, he's in a tough matchup, but Brady on the road against Jacksonville. It's crazy that we're even talking about this. A few years ago, we'd just be laughing right now. But I feel good about Brady. It's a short passing game. You have James White mixed in there and Gronk. You don't really have to worry about the outside receivers. They're going to be taken out of the game. But yeah, I like Brady's. He's good.
Yeah, Brady, very good. Shocking news. Our buddy Jeremy weighs in. How do we peg Steelers versus Chiefs? Defenses are both a little worse than we've seen recently. New quarterback for Chiefs and no Le'Veon Bell. Hang on to this one, Jeremy. We're going to get to that game coming up in just a second. It's one of the ones coming up next on our list. So before we get to that, let's answer one more question from Tyler. He says, do you guys like Chris Thompson over Rex Burkhead or Kenny Golladay in standard? I think knowing that it's standard, Nate, makes a difference here. I love Thompson, obviously, in PPR. To be honest with you, I think I probably prefer Golladay in a game that I think there's going to be a bunch of points scored. Golladay is a new red zone target for Matthew Stafford. And if it's touchdown dependent in standard leagues, I think I'm leaning towards Golladay, but I don't know how you feel about it.
Yeah, it depends what you're looking for. You have guys with a higher ceiling like Golladay, and I think Burkhead would probably give you the highest floor if he plays, but there's still a chance he doesn't play. I mean, he had that concussion, and you're playing against Jacksonville, but if you get inside the red zone, it's going to be Burkhead's ball.
Right.
And so he's kind of, I guess, touchdown dependent. But Thompson's in a good spot too, honestly. I think they get out to a lead, and maybe he won't be as involved as he was last week. So I would go with Burkhead if he's healthy, and if not, I'd probably go with Golladay, like you were saying.
Yeah, the latest information on Burkhead via Roto World and Jeff Howe on Twitter. He did travel with the Patriots to Jacksonville, still in concussion protocol. But and the other tough part about this too, especially if you're playing in season long, is it's a 3:25 Central Time start. So
right.
A lot of the lineups are already going to be locked by the time you have any information. So if you're planning on playing Burkhead, go ahead and keep him in that flex spot, and that way you leave your options open just a tad. So Nate's going with Burkhead. I am going to go with Kenny Golladay, but a good question, Tyler. Appreciate you watching the show. Nate, because of Jeremy's question, let's go ahead and skip to Kansas City and Pittsburgh. This is a fascinating game, and a game that the offensive script and everybody involved believes is going to be an absolute shootout. We've seen it go from the Steelers at -5. The line has moved just a point to -1, but the over-under has gone from 50, which was one of the highest on the slate, all the way up to 53. And I'll be honest, I did some different radio appearances throughout the week, and earlier on in the week, I was down on Mahomes this week. I looked at Tyreek Hill and the record-setting efficiency levels, and I thought to myself, he's going to be a great player, and he's going to have an awesome season, but, I mean, people were saying that they wouldn't trade, Michael Thomas for Tyreek Hill or Julio Jones, and right. To me, that's ridiculous because I'm always looking at volume. Mm-hmm. But having said that, I thought the Steelers defense, especially coming off an embarrassing tie on the road against Cleveland, was going to come home, and I thought Mahomes was more likely to look like the second-year starter and be a little bit more mistake-prone and interception-prone than we've seen before in the past. But every indication, and everybody, in Vegas especially too, believes this game is going to be high-scoring, back and forth, that you can pick on Pittsburgh secondary. And I'm starting to change my mind a little bit, and I think Mahomes could actually be a really nice play here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is going to be the first game where he has to play with a negative game script, and playing from behind is a little different. In the Chargers game, he got out to a big lead on some big plays, and it's a lot easier when the pressure is off. But right. When you're playing from behind, they know you're throwing the ball more. And I know, for one thing, I know like Kelsey is going to get taken away. I don't think he'll be a factor in this game. Like historically, he always struggles when they play against Pittsburgh. I think it has to do with the zone that they play or something. But they're going to have to give Tyreek Hill more volume. That's going to be the way to stay in the game because I think he ran like 22 pass routes.
He ran 20 or I think it was either 20 or 22 pass routes. And just for comparison's sake, Alvin Kamara ran 20 as a running back and 17 as a wide receiver. So he nearly doubled Tyreek Hill's snap count. They almost scored the same amount of points in fantasy last week in DFS. And Kamara was looked at as an elite level option, but I think part of that is knowing that he's constantly going to be on the field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's got to be part of it. I think the Chiefs are going to look to get Hunt involved as well in the passing game.
I'm with you.
Passing to running backs on first down is one of the most successful plays you can run in the NFL, yet teams don't like to do it. But I could see the Chiefs incorporating that because they're going to have to get him involved. Maybe they'll try to slow down the game or something with him, but he was effective last week. They just, for some reason, didn't go to him that much.
Yeah, Mahomes only had to complete 15 passes. I'm going over one of the best in the business, and Evan Silva's in his matchups article. He completed 15 passes, still had 256 yards and 4 touchdowns. He also rushed the ball, 5 rushes for 21 yards. As far as the Steelers side goes, we know Antonio Brown's going to be a stud, especially at home. Big Ben's road and home splits, there's always a ton of variance there. And for whatever reason, Pittsburgh has just never been a very good team on the road, especially in those noon start games. I'm thinking about their loss in Week 3 last season against the Bears, which was one of the most predictable and pathetic offense. That was against Mike Glennon, by the way. It wasn't even against Trubisky. It was against Mike Glennon, and the Steelers found a way to lose that game in Soldier Field. But Roethlisberger's got this elbow injury, and it's sort of like what we talked about with Aaron Rodgers just a little bit earlier. Man, painkillers in the NFL are really, really good, and they're really, really strong. So it doesn't make sense to me to think that Big Ben is going to be in any sort of serious trouble. If it was against a better secondary, I don't know if I'd play him. But the Chiefs secondary is atrocious, so I'm going to be all over Big Ben and Antonio Brown in this game, especially at fantasy sports markets where I don't have to worry about the salary. And maybe you can make an argument that with everybody likely on Breeze this week, that Roethlisberger has a chance to be a little bit more low-owned.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I feel like he's going to be the highest owned quarterback. If I had to guess, I think Breeze will be right up there with him, though. Yeah. I think you're right. But, I mean, you're looking at the Chiefs' defense. They have 3 slot cornerbacks starting for them.
Right?
So they got Scandrick, who came over from the Redskins. They didn't want him. He was a locker room cancer, and the Chiefs are like, yeah, I'll take him.
They needed somebody.
Yeah, they're just, I don't know. And they all play man-to-man. That's the Chiefs' That's their scheme they like to run. You play man-to-man against Antonio Brown, against Juju, against Connor. It's not going to work. Their defense is so bad. They're going to get roasted all day. And another thing I like to add is I think they're going to pass the ball to Connor a lot. The Chiefs' 2 starting inside linebackers, they're both thumpers. I mean, they're good at stopping the run. They're terrible in coverage. So if I'm the Steelers, I'm going to run Connor out there in a lot more routes, and maybe he'll get some more targets, and that would kind of help with his volume.
Yeah, and I think Connor could actually be a low-owned guy over at Fantasy Sports Markets with everybody on Kamara and everybody on Todd Gurley. And I think both of those guys are obviously in smash spots this week, but Connor is too. And I think people look at him and say, well, if his price is low on some of the other sites, why should I play him at Fantasy Sports Markets when I can get both of those guys? And the reality is that you're looking at volume, you're looking at opportunity, and the Chiefs' run defense isn't very good either. So I think Connor is in an outstanding spot. Really quickly, last thoughts on this game. You mentioned Travis Kelce potentially being slowed down by Pittsburgh once again. Do you look at him as possibly a contrarian type play? And on the other side, if everyone's going to be on Brown, are you looking at maybe pivoting to Juju Smith-Schuster to try and get some exposure without necessarily going all in?
Yeah, I think Kelce might be a good pivot off of Gronk. But if you're going to pivot down, I would probably pivot to Ertz. I think Ertz is in a great spot. I just know historically Kelce hasn't been that good. And if you go look at Mahomes' heat map of where he throws the ball, he doesn't throw the ball in between the line of scrimmage and the 10. That's the reason Hunt and none of the running backs are targeted. It's all down the field, which is great. Completely the opposite of Alex Smith. But I just don't think Kelce is in a good matchup. He had 6 targets and I think came down with 1 catch. So I think they're still building their chemistry. I mean, it's better than Sammy Watkins, but that's not really saying much.
Right, and Watkins was one of those guys that I was fading entirely in season-long leagues this year. Yep. I just felt that the volume was going to be really inconsistent week in to week out. Maybe Standard is a guy that was going to get some decent touchdown upside. So I didn't particularly love that there. Let's continue to take some of your guys' questions over here on the Facebook page, on our Facebook live stream. He is Nate Coleman. Follow him on Twitter at JHawkChalk89. And also read his work over for fantasyinsiders.com. From Brandon, said, I had Delaney Walker at tight end, and obviously he's now hurt for the season. Who are some tight ends to pick up off the waivers? Is Vance McDonald a legit play today? Let's start with McDonald, Nate. I like him. I think he's sort of in that George Kittle mode of a receiver first and a blocking tight end second. But Roethlisberger has felt comfortable throwing to Jesse James before. So I don't necessarily love him. And I think maybe it's a decent spot, but I think there's some other decent tight ends available on the waiver wire. But what are your thoughts on Vance McDonald today?
Yeah, I mean, he's probably their fifth option when Roethlisberger is looking around. So it's kind of a crapshoot. He might not be a bad option, but there's probably a better tight end on your waiver wire, I would guess. I mean, there's guys like Jared Cook, who's scoring 180 yards like last week. So I think there's some other good options. Jonnu Smith is another one from Tennessee that long term I think he could be really good because, Mariota likes to target tight ends a lot with Delaney Walker leaving. But I would kind of look through your waiver wire and look for who's projected the highest and then look at their next 4 games, what their schedule looks like.
Yeah, I think some names that are coming to mind. He might already be owned likely in your league, but Ben Watson, especially going up against Cleveland today. I think the big target for Breeze is obviously Michael Thomas. We talked about Ted Ginn and Alvin Kamara, but Cleveland has been atrocious at stopping the tight end in the past, so I think Watson is a really intriguing name. If you're thinking about, some other red zone targets, maybe Austin Seferian-Jenkins is still available for Jacksonville going up against New England. They're going to put so much emphasis on trying to stop the running game and the short passing attack with TJ Yeldon today, who I think is in a really nice spot with some bad weather there. Jonnu Smith, I think, is another great call. And then maybe if you're looking for a garbage time hero, maybe Ricky Seals-Jones for Arizona. I think Sam Bradford's going to play better today, even though it's on the road and even though the Rams defense is really good. They have some really good outside corners, so maybe that's another good opportunity to funnel to the tight end. Let's keep it going. Let's keep some of your questions here. Let's go to some of our Periscope questions. This is from Big Mike 82. What are your thoughts on Matt Ryan? He looked terrible, Nate, in week 1, and I think it's a product of some bad play calling from Steve Sarkisian. I don't think he's in a really good spot where he has provided Matt Ryan the best situation there. I will say this. I think he has owned Carolina over the last several matchups. He is at home, which I feel better about. And I think him and Julio have a chance to be a really contrarian stack today, where they have a chance to put him some points. And that's another game that I feel really good about in a game stack on the contrarian side. So I like Matt Ryan today. I think he's startable even in season long, even though it kind of makes my heart stop a little bit. But where are you on Matty Ice for today?
Yeah, I think overall he had a down year and a new offense. I think this year he'll be better. I know week 1 he looked terrible, but I think I read Evan Silva was talking about they were struggling to hold on to the ball. Like it was so humid there that he couldn't get a lot of zip on the ball. So, and Nick Foles struggled the same way in that game. So that might have had something to do with it. But the crazy thing about Matt Ryan is last year he was 6 in attempts in the red zone, and he was 46 in completion percentage. And they ran 4 less red zone plays per game. So I think their struggles are still in the red zone, and it's simple stuff that they could fix. But I like him to bounce back this week. I mean, don't forget about Julio had 300 yards against the Panthers 2 seasons ago. He's always just torn them up. So, yeah, they're in a good matchup. I think they match up well against the Panthers, and I'd look to them as a good contrarian stack.
Julio was targeted, let's see, how many times last week? Because it was a bunch.
1,000.
He was targeted. He was on the field for 57 of 70 snaps. He was targeted 19 times and still caught 10 balls for 169 yards. Didn't have the touchdown. That's the thing, man, is that people just see the lack of touchdowns from Julio, and immediately they want to run away. I still think last year was more of an It was, what's the word I'm
Anomaly.
trying to look for?
Anomaly.
Yes, it was a complete and total anomaly last year, and the targets are there. Even with potential emergence of Calvin Ridley down the road, Mohamed Sanu continues to be a decent receiver, and now you have Tevin Coleman as the feature back with no Devontae Freeman. Man, to me, this just feels like if it's going to be a back and forth game, I love Christian McCaffrey in this game as well. And Devin Funchess, the targets for him obviously go up when there is no Greg Olsen. We saw that from both McCaffrey and from Funchess last year. So I think Funchess could be another sneaky guy in DFS today over at Fantasy Sports Markets. Do you look at this game as another potential shootout? I know you said you like the stack, but what about on the Carolina side for you?
Yeah, I mean McCaffrey's a really strong cash play. So the Atlanta lost both their two best defensive players. They lost Deion Jones and Neal. So
Yes.
and Jones. So what Atlanta always does, their defensive scheme is they give up running back receptions, but they don't allow any yards after the carry. Their scheme is built around that. So without Deion Jones and how fast he is, they're going to have a hard time stopping the yak after running back catches and runs. So
Right.
I feel like McCaffrey's in a great spot. His touchdown upside is always going to be capped because you have to worry about Cam and the fullback and the other running back vulture and carries from him. But I think he's in a great spot. He'd probably be my fourth favorite play among running backs this week, actually.
And by the way, one thing that we were mentioning before the pick 3 games over at Fantasy Sports Markets for our week 2 slate, you know what? That's a really good way to be contrarian is to throw Christian McCaffrey in there as one of your pick 3 candidates. If you wanted to even include him with Kamara and Todd Gurley, if you feel like those are the 2 safe plays, maybe take a chance in the $5 pick 3 for running backs and throw in Christian McCaffrey as another possible option. So a lot of questions are coming in as we continue to go through the slate. He's Nate Coleman. I'm Ben Heisler with Fantasy Sports Markets. Thank you guys for being a part of our live broadcast here on week 2. And, if you got questions, we're right here on the Facebook Live page as well as Periscope, so be sure to send them our way. We'll try to get to as many of them as we possibly can. Nate, let's go rapid fire through some of these so we can try and answer some more of these questions and go through some more of our favorite plays on the slate. From Noah, do you go with Mike Wallace or Randall Cobb PPR flex? I think Rodgers, especially having to go in the shotgun and the pistol throughout most of this game with his injury, I think Randall Cobb is in a spectacular spot today, even against Minnesota.
It's tough. So Cobb would have the higher floor.
Yeah,
I actually like Wallace better, though. I think I mentioned this before. I think the Eagles are going to score a lot of points today. At the end of the day, they're playing the Bucs, who had the lowest success rate against the pass and against the rush. And the Vikings aren't going to give up more than probably 3 touchdowns. So I think Cobb is kind of limited, but he has a higher floor.
Okay, so for this one. And I'm trying to remember Noah. I would say that if you want to play the safe route, go with Randall Cobb. If you want a little bit more upside, Nate is going with Mike Wallace. Brandon, Kelsey's going to go 2 weeks with nothing. I guess we kind of addressed this. I think in season long, he's still absolutely worth a start because you drafted him probably in the 2nd or the 3rd round. I think his volume will go up a little bit, although you're right, Pittsburgh has done a pretty good job against him. But I think we both agree that we're avoiding him in DFS this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, from Michael, do you go with Jimmy G or Andrew Luck? To me, this is a no-brainer, Michael. I'm going Garoppolo. I think Luck is in a really bad spot on the road against Washington. I know their defense isn't great, but Garoppolo at home against Detroit after they gave up 47 at home against the Jets. I'm going Jimmy G.
Yeah, that's an easy pick. Jimmy G for sure.
My guy Joey checks in. Sammy Watkins versus Pittsburgh or Sterling Shepard versus Dallas in PPR. We're both pretty down on Watkins right now. It's an intriguing game for both, but I certainly think the safer play, especially in PPR, is Sterling Shepard.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think that Dallas and Giants game is going to be lower scoring, maybe around like 41 points. So he might not have as much upside, but again, he has the higher floor. Watkins is in a shootout though, so it depends what you need to do. If you're playing someone and they're projected to score a lot more points than you, and you got to take the risk, then go for it with Watkins. But you just don't know what you're going to get week to week with him.
Yeah. From Blake, no more Fitz magic. Do you not believe in another week 2 success story of Ryan Fitzpatrick this week? Because even though he's at home, we saw what Philadelphia did to Atlanta, and I think their defense is legit. And I think we start to see the Ryan Fitzpatrick and not necessarily the Ryan Fitzmagic for this week.
Yeah, he's been really inconsistent. Every time he's come off of a great game, the next week usually he doesn't have a good game. And like I mentioned before, the Eagles have 10 days to get ready for this game. So they're going to be not only scheming stuff up offensively, but defensively they're going to have time to prepare for this. But Fitzpatrick's not bad, though. He's not a bad play, but it just the ownership's going to be on him because of last week, and you don't want to have recency bias with your picks.
Yeah, and he's going to throw a ton. Especially with how good the Eagles are against stopping the run. I was a guy that was big on Peyton Barber all throughout my different drafts, and I bet on him in auctions, and I still think the volume is going to be there for him. It just is not a good week if you're going to try and target him in season long. Jeremy wants to know about Dion Lewis, especially with Houston controlling the game. He got a ton of touches last week. Game script should dictate it again. We kind of talked about it a little bit earlier. I think Lewis is in a great spot this week and a really nice high floor guy.
Yeah, he's a perfect option. He's kind of like Chris Thompson. You just plug him into your flex every week.
Yeah. From Seth, do you go with Russell Wilson or Andrew Luck this week? Neither of them have a particularly good match. I'm sorry, he changed it. He said, do you go with Russell Wilson or Phillip Rivers? Rivers is on the road at Buffalo. You know what's crazy about this game too, Nate, is that I expected Vegas to have a much higher spread for this game as I load up the Vegas totals in just a second. Okay, here we go. So the projected total for the Chargers this week was just under 26 points. It has now gone down to 25. Buffalo was projected for 18 points. That's gone down to 17.5. The over-under in this game has gone down from 44 to 42.5. And the spread has actually gone down. It opened at -8 for the Chargers. It's gone down to -7.5. So Vegas still absolutely anticipates the Chargers to win this game and win fairly comfortably. But are you a little bit surprised that in this matchup, which should absolutely favor the Chargers, that sort of the numbers have kind of gone in the opposite direction?
Yeah, so I know the sharp money has been on the Bills the last few days, so it's kind of pulled it closer together. But just I think it has to do with the Chargers traveling across the United States, going to the East Coast. Yeah. For some reason, anytime you expect the Chargers to just go out there and crush it, they tend not to. And I still love the Chargers in this matchup. Between Rivers and Wilson, probably Rivers is in the better matchup, but Wilson should be the better matchup. Yeah, for sure the better matchup. I mean, Wilson will probably throw the ball a lot more. But I think Rivers, I would take Rivers for sure. But yeah, it should be an interesting matchup. I wouldn't be surprised if the Bills somehow won the game, knowing the Chargers' luck.
There's something to be said about these West Coast teams traveling to the East Coast. We saw last week the struggles of the 49ers. Now, granted, it was against Minnesota, but that was part of the reason that I wanted nothing to do with the 49ers in week 1. You're going to see a different situation for week 2, obviously, with them being at home. But you're right. I think I'd still go with Rivers just because I believe in the matchup, and Buffalo got gashed, especially on the ground. I still love Melvin Gordon this week. You talked about a couple weeks ago that this is the most healthy he's ever been coming into the start of the NFL season. But maybe if you want to be a little bit sharp, if you're following the sharp money, maybe you look at somebody like LaShawn McCoy as a pivot there and say, okay, if I believe that the Chargers are going to put up some points, the only way for Buffalo to stay in this game, and Vegas believes that they will, is a big game out of Shady McCoy. You buying in there?
I mean, you gotta have some big cojones to roll with McCoy. I think just their offensive line is so decimated, but
no Joey Bosa for the Chargers this week.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I love Gordon this week. I'll tell you what, 13 targets last week against the Chiefs. I think he's in a great spot. This is the best offensive line he's had. This is the most healthy he's been. This is probably the best offense he's been in. So he's in a great spot again.
Let's take one of the Periscope questions. And I know that we had a bunch of games that we had planned on going through, but I think more importantly, it's better for us to answer your guys' questions. We appreciate you guys joining us as part of this live stream. We do it every Sunday at 9 a.m. Nate's our special co-host this week. Really appreciate him hopping on board. And make sure you guys give him a follow as well. Check out his great work over at Fantasy Insiders. And follow him on the tweet machine as well at JayhawkChalk89. For another one from Big Mike. Pick one between DeAndre Hopkins, Brandon Cooks, and Jarvis Landry in PPR. Well, Cooks has a great matchup, but I'm going to go ahead and rule him out just because of how many receivers the Rams have, and game script would indicate that Todd Gurley is probably going to end up running the ball for most of the game, especially in the second half. Um, Landry is in a spectacular spot with how much Cleveland is going to have to throw the ball, and they're inside. Hopkins is also dealing with a bit of an injury, but he's expected to go. I just have a hard time saying no to DeAndre Hopkins, especially in a pretty intriguing matchup against Tennessee. But can you make the argument for Landry here, or are you going with Hopkins as well?
Yeah, you got to start your studs. I mean, it's not even a question, man. You got to roll with Hopkins. I mean, Landry's fine too. I mean, if that they're both on your team though, I don't understand. Roll them both out. Or is he talking about maybe like DFS or something?
I think maybe he has like Antonio Brown and DeAndre Hopkins. I'm not sure
Yeah,
I'm
good
not
for
sure what your
two.
situation is, Big Mike. But the fact that you have both of those guys and one of them has to sit is actually a fairly intriguing situation there. So I'm gonna go Hopkins as well. But again, like if you're playing the pick three game over at Fantasy Sports Markets, I think Hopkins. If you wanted to throw Landry in as a contrarian as one of your top three, the volume that he's going to get is insane today, especially with no Josh Gordon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's keep your questions going over on the Facebook Live. This is from Megan. Season long got a flex between Philip Lindsay or Tyler Lockett in a half point PPR. So PPR I think is important here because it's not necessarily Lockett's strong suit. He's a big play receiver with elite level speed. And Lindsay was targeted, I believe. I think he got 17 touches in week one against Seattle. It's a great matchup again against Oakland. But I kind of look at it as maybe it's going to be a little bit less Lindsay and more Royce Freeman this week because of how bad Oakland's run defense and pass defense is. The fact that you can out-physical them at the line of scrimmage. And game script more likely dictates Freeman to be more involved in the game. So I would probably go Tyler Lockett with no Doug Baldwin.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it comes down to volume and who you think is going to get more touches. I think if the Raiders get out to a lead, I would imagine they'd rely more on Royce Freeman, just being the bigger bruiser back. But, yeah, I'd probably roll with Lockett there. He has more upside. And, I mean, there's no Jimmy Graham there. There's no Doug Baldwin. So some of the touchdowns are going to flow his way, too. And they're probably going to be playing from behind. So, yeah, I'd roll with Lockett there.
Okay. Let's keep some of your questions going from Seth. Half-point PPR flex between Corey Davis and Tevin Coleman. I guess Davis is a little bit more of the upside play. I just think the volume is too much from Coleman to say no to, especially this week.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Okay. Another one from Seth. Standard need one running back and one flex between Royce Freeman, Tevin Coleman, TJ Yeldon, Corey Davis, and Kenny Stills. All right, let's sort of take it one by one. If we're looking at the best running back plays between Freeman, Coleman, and Yeldon for this week, are you in agreement in standard leagues that Coleman still, even though he's more of a PPR back, is the more likely option?
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
So let's take Coleman out, go ahead and put him in the running back spot. And then between the flex play in a standard league of Royce Freeman, TJ Yeldon, Corey Davis, and Kenny Stills, that one is a little bit tougher. I feel like I want to lean towards Davis and Stills. Actually, no, I take that back. Not if it's standard. We just talked about Royce Freeman and likely getting the bulk of the carries this week for Denver against Oakland. Yeldon, I think, is going to be involved a lot in the passing game, but the game script and the weather favors him. So between Freeman, Yeldon, Davis, and Stills, I think I'm probably going either Freeman or Stills, just because I know that Stills has the best chance of getting into the end zone.
Yeah, that's a tough one with standard. I think with standard, I tend to lean towards more touches. So I think Yeldon will have the most touches.
Okay.
He was targeted a lot in the receiving game. Patriots kind of struggle against running backs. I would roll with Yeldon for sure.
Let's see for Yeldon as far as his opportunities in week one. If I'm going through the game log right here. He was on the field for 39 out of 63 snaps. He had 14 rushing attempts for 51 yards. And then in the passing game, he had 7 targets. So, I think you could certainly make a compelling argument for Yeldon there. So let's go ahead and agree on Yeldon for that flex play. couple more questions continuing. Jeremy is predicting Buffalo outright. You heard it right here.
Oh,
Okay,
man.
Jeremy.
Yeah.
Jeremy's never been wrong before, so let's go ahead and roll the dice there. My buddy Dan checks in out in Kentucky. Pat Mahomes or Jared Goff to start this week. Oh man, you're talking about like one of the safest plays on the board in Goff with a major high upside guy in Mahomes. And I mean, you and I both like upside. I think we're both going Mahomes here.
Yeah, I'd go Mahomes in a shootout. He has more chances to score.
All right, let's get back to some of the game previews that we were going through before. Let's go to, we kind of talked about Minnesota and Green Bay already, so we can probably move past that. We talked about Cleveland and New Orleans. Miami and the New York Jets, we haven't had a chance to really discuss because there's some intriguing plays from both sides here. This game opened up with the Jets as 2.5-point home favorites against Miami. Both of them coming off of week one wins, with Miami having that strange weather game in week one where the game took about like 9 hours to finish. And the over-under has dropped from 44 down to 42.5. Let's start with Sam Darnold, Nate. Do you look at him as a guy that you are going to start to believe in as the season goes on, or do you think maybe it was sort of a week one enigma of the Lions not really wanting to play for Matt Patricia early on?
I mean, it was surprising to say the least. He's the youngest quarterback to ever start a game, and he went in there and looked really efficient. I like him. I don't know if he's like a relevant fantasy option unless you're looking at like 2 quarterback leagues or something like that. But I mean, the real star of the show is Quincy Enunwa, man. He looked great. You're talking about, I think he had 10 targets on 21 pass attempts, which is like close to 50% of the target share. So I think he's going to be a fantasy stud moving forward. If he's on your waiver wire for some weird reason, like go pick him up right now.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Question from Tyler. Thoughts on Deshaun Watson for season long? Should I hang on with Tyrod Taylor and Mitch Trubisky there to pick up? Oh my goodness. I don't even know where to begin. Yes, Deshaun Watson, you should absolutely hang on to him and hang on to him for as long as you can because he's going to be a top 5 quarterback this year, easy. I don't know what you saw out of Trubisky in week one that made you really excited other than maybe a good opening drive and his rush floor, but you know, I've always been on Team Tyrod, on Team Tygod, and no, Deshaun Watson just had a rough game, but still got them in a position to potentially win on the road against New England. So, Tyler, do not worry about Deshaun Watson. He is in a smash spot really throughout the rest of the season with DeAndre Hopkins, hopefully a healthy Will Fuller there with him. I'm not sure if there's anything really more to add there.
Yeah, I mean, if you drafted Watson, you spent a lot of draft capital on him.
Right.
You're not going to get that in a return, especially when he's not playing well right now. So the only option I would look at, maybe after he comes off like a really big game in a few weeks, if your roster isn't looking strong outside of him, you could look to trade him for some more value. But you probably drafted him really high. You shouldn't have, but you did because, I mean, it's a warning. I get it.
Not everybody can be a team, no quarterbacks until the last round. There's just some people that they don't have the stomach to do it, and I'm one of those people. I thought about it, and I found myself in no situation where I could just wait till the very end.
Yeah, I'm comfortable, man. I'll roll with Blake Bortles every week. I don't care.
Well, because that. Here's the thing, though, and when it comes to this type of conversation, is that, yes, you know that you're going to load up on plenty of running back and wide receiver and tight end talent, and flex plays are plenty. The problem is then you have too many good options. And then you're left thinking, I think in that situation you tend to start to overthink yourself, and then there's sometimes a part of life in the fantasy world that's nice where you just don't have to think about which quarterback you want to play. You just know that guy's going to be your guy every week.
Yeah, I mean, I get both sides of it. I know JJ Zacharyson has that podcast that he does where he just basically streams quarterbacks every week. And last year, I think they streamed a quarterback 6 overall just by streaming every single week. So
really?
There's always options on the waiver wire. But if you just want to plug them and start them, I mean, there's nothing wrong with going with Rodgers or going with Watson. It's not my style.
I think that's perfectly fair. From Go Pokes BF on Periscope, when will Kareem Hunt be playworthy in daily fantasy at FSM? I would say this week would be a great opportunity to roll with Kareem Hunt. Again, you're looking for contrarian plays when there's no salary cap. It's likely going to be Alvin Kamara and Todd Gurley in pretty much almost every lineup this week. So If you're looking for somebody to be a little bit different with, you know that Kareem Hunt's going to get plenty of touches this week against Pittsburgh. And if I'm going to exploit against their defense, it's likely through the run defense. So I think Kareem Hunt's in a great spot this week.
Yeah, I think you could do a game stack. Like, let's assume maybe the Chiefs will be leading the whole time. Like, everyone's just, the Steelers are going to win. It's possible the Chiefs get out to a big lead because they play better on the road as far as Tyreek Hill goes. Maybe they start playing with the lead, and then Hill will get the ball more. So you could go Brown, Roethlisberger, and Connor, and then run it back with Hunt, something like that.
Yeah, Hunt is certainly in play. If you really want to go contrarian, maybe you go to Travis Kelce. It's there's just so much to really sort of be intrigued by in this game that I think there's a lot of different ways that you can go. We got about 10 minutes left, so still time for more of your questions on the Facebook Live broadcast. If you're watching on Periscope, we appreciate that as well. See a few more questions are popping up now that the comments are starting to go through. So keep them coming, both on Periscope and on Facebook Live, as we continue to go through some of these matchups here. One other game that I think it's worth diving into for today is Detroit and San Francisco. We've talked a little bit about it already, but I think it's worth hyping on again. That while everybody today, Nate, is going to be all over Pittsburgh and Kansas City, and rightfully so. The over-under has gone up from 50 to 53. You have two quarterbacks that aren't afraid to throw the ball down the field. You have plenty of elite-level receiving and running back options on both sides. I look at Detroit and San Francisco with another game where the over-under has gone up from 47.5 to 48.5. It's one of the higher totals on the day. Both of these teams have seen their implied score go up. I think we've seen a lot of people on Jimmy Garoppolo and George Kittle. Dante Pettis is going to get the start with no Marquise Goodwin. Pierre Garçon is going to be on the outside as well. Man, I think Matthew Stafford is in an elite level spot against a defense that is good but not particularly great. He's going to have to throw the ball a ton because Garoppolo is going to have a really good matchup. And he's got great receivers, and they don't run the ball a heck of a lot. I'm really surprised that there's not a lot of people on Matthew Stafford today, and I'm absolutely going to consider rolling him in tournaments today.
Yeah, he's a great contrarian play. I mean, we have a big enough sample size with Stafford. You know what you're going to get. And then the targets they're focused on wide receivers. They don't really pass to the tight end. They don't really run the ball that much. So, one of those three receivers is probably going to have a big day. So, yeah, I think he's a great contrarian play. I kind of see that as maybe the fourth highest scoring game. It could be a shootout potentially.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think Galladay is another intriguing play. A lot of people are going to be off Marvin Jones, but he has a chance to have a big play. One of the things he did really well is a back-end wide receiver 1/2 last year, finishing the season in standard leagues. From Justin Tyler 44 on Periscope, should I start Andrew Luck, Tom Brady, or Drew Brees this week? Brees, yes, and don't think twice about it.
Yeah.
And I get it because Tom Brady is a guy that you feel like you always can rely on in these types of situations. But Brees, even though Cleveland's defense has improved, this game does not bode well for them at all.
Yeah, how did he get all those quarterbacks? Some of these guys have some awesome rosters,
right?
Man.
Well, clearly they weren't listening to you because they were reaching for quarterbacks in the third and the fourth round.
Right.
A couple other games that stand out. We talked a little bit about Oakland and Denver already. The line continues to move in favor of the Broncos. It opened at -4.5 for Denver at home against Oakland, and it's now gone all the way up to -6.5. You a believer of what Denver's offense and defense can do now that they have a competent quarterback in Case Keenum? And on the flip side, are we looking at the Raiders in a completely different light after what we saw out of them from week one? Because I think people still looked at them and said they can be competitive this year. But they were just so bad in the second half against a really good team that I think they actually play the Broncos a little bit closer than people think this week. But I still think Denver comes out with the win.
Yeah, I mean, for the Raiders, their biggest weapon is Amari Cooper, and they've been moving him around in the slot a lot more. The problem is Chris Harris moves around in the slot, and he plays on the outside. He's probably the best slot cornerback there is. So I think Amari Cooper is going to be taken out of the game. And then you're probably looking at another Jared Cook, Jalen Richard type of game. And Jared Cook is in an awesome matchup. I think I read the first 4 teams he plays, they've given up 29 total touchdowns to tight ends. So he has an awesome schedule. That's another guy I'd look up on the waiver wire, but he's in a great matchup. He's in play on tournaments and cash, and so I like him. And then on the Broncos side, I think everyone's going to be in on Sanders. I totally get that. He has a really safe floor, but yeah, I mean, Demaryius Thomas is in a great spot, too. I like both of them this week, and Royce Freeman also, because you assume they're going to be playing with the lead.
Yeah, and I think Sutton has a chance to be a really good wide receiver, too.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if I'm ready to roll the dice on him just yet.
No.
Certainly not over at Fantasy Sports Markets. I think there's too many options there, but I do like Sutton quite a bit. Question from Dan on the Facebook Live feed. What are Stephon Diggs' chances against Green Bay? Packers secondary has improved, but I think, especially if it's season long, you got to roll with Stephon Diggs this week. I think Kirk Cousins is in a solid spot. With Rodgers, again, it's going to be about just managing the knee injury and just making sure that he doesn't make it worse. He's going to get the ball out quick. It's going to be like a high percentage throw. Like Aaron Rodgers is going to look like Alex Smith a lot today, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, which means I don't think he's going to turn the ball over, but it's going to be a lot of quick passes. Especially with Xavier Rhodes on Devontae Adams. I think he's going to get the ball out quick, and I think Minnesota will have to score some points today.
Yeah, I mean, if Diggs is early season Diggs that's healthy, you start him. You don't have to think about it. He's one of the best route runners in the league. If he's ever on the injury report, then you have to worry about him. But if he's healthy and it's early season, just start him.
My buddy Bradley checks in. And by the way, thanks for the ride and the great brunch recommendation, Bradley. I appreciate it. Matt Stafford, will he have more completions to his receivers or 49ers defensive backs?
Come on, man.
We talked about it. I love Matt Stafford today, and I think he's going to be a great contrarian quarterback play, so I would absolutely roll the dice with Stafford. I don't know what your season-long options are, if it's just him or if he's your top guy, but I think he's in a great spot. I think he's in a great spot today.
He's in a great spot. Did you hear about how the locker room is divided against Matt Patricia?
Yes.
I guess that's crazy. Already, it's been one game.
Right. And so, if anything, if the defense hates him and he's a former defensive coordinator, and the offense is going to have to throw a ton. They don't have much of a running game anyway. At some point, it'll be Kerryon Johnson, and it should be because he's the best running back on that team. But passes to Theo Riddick. And then three really good wide receivers in Kenny Golladay and Golden Tate and Marvin Jones. I think Stafford is in line for a big day. All right, we got a couple minutes left. Nate, I know we didn't get the chance to go through all the games, so don't forget to hit us up on Twitter. He's at JayhawkChalk89. You can follow me at Benny Heiss and also follow Fantasy Sports Markets at FSM Contests. When you're heading to Fantasy Sports Markets, by the way, remember to use this promo code HOMER, HOMER. It's right on the screen. It is $10 without a deposit required that you guys can use. So we got about a couple minutes left, Nate. If you're looking at some potential lineups and plays without a salary cap, I don't know whether you're likely to go a little bit more cash this week or if you're looking for a few contrarian plays. So let's just go through a couple names at each position that we really like, starting at quarterback without worrying about salary. Who do you really like this week?
I think Roethlisberger and Breeze are at the top of your list. Those are the two I would go with. But knowing that, most people are going to be in on them. So if you want to pivot from them, I think Stafford's another good one, actually. Jimmy G's in a good spot. But yeah, I think Roethlisberger is going to be on most of my lineups. So.
He's going to be on the Beat Benny Heiss lineup, which you can find at fantasysportsmarkets.com. Roethlisberger is going to be the guy for me, even with the potential injury concerns. You're right. I think him and Breeze are going to be the two most guys that are likely owned. But Stafford's in a great spot. I think Deshaun Watson and Pat Mahomes also have a chance to be a little bit less owned from the quarterback side. Running back. The chalk plays here are obviously Todd Gurley and Alvin Kamara. I think Melvin Gordon has a chance to be fairly high owned in a great matchup, and James Conner as well. But if I'm looking for a little bit of a contrarian play, maybe David Johnson if you think he's going to get some garbage time. Christian McCaffrey and Zeke Elliott. They're going to have to run the ball a ton with him against the Giants, and the Giants aren't great at stopping the run. So who do you like from the running back class today?
Yeah, I mean, Gurley and Kamara, they just have the highest floor and the highest ceiling. So if you don't have them in your lineup, you're kind of going to start off on a bad foot.
Yeah.
But if you want to go contrarian, I mean, Gordon is in a great spot. Connor's in a great spot. McCaffrey's in a great spot. So those would be my top 5. If you want to pivot off of them, instead of going with Zeke, I think, like, I don't know. The Giants know how to stop the Cowboys. It's pretty simple. Like, the only way the Cowboys can win is if they're playing with a lead. Well, guess what? Their defense sucks and they can't score. So you just know they're going to rush the ball. So Saquon Barkley is a guy I really like.
Barkley, you know what? That's a great contrarian play for this week and a really good pick 3 running back spot for Barkley. I like that call a lot. On the wide receiver side, I think Antonio Brown will be in every lineup made this week at Fantasy Sports Markets. But after that, I certainly think Julio Jones is in a great spot against Carolina. DeAndre Hopkins and Michael Thomas are great spots as well. If you're not playing Barkley, maybe do you look at somebody like Odell Beckham as a possible contrarian play this week?
Yeah, I mean, he's matchup proof, so Beckham's always in play, and he's going to have super low ownership. So, yeah, he'd be a good option. But everyone's going to have Brown and probably Julio.
Yeah, I think so too. Maybe Keenan Allen going up against Buffalo on the road, but something about Vegas makes me think that this game's going to be close. And you can also throw out Tyreek Hill again if you want against Pittsburgh, if you think Mahomes is going to be chucking the ball all over the field. All right, last one at tight end. Gronk tends to be the number one play each and every week, and rightfully so. But Zach Ertz, I think, is a nice pivot this week. George Kittle, if you want to do an even bigger pivot without a salary league. Certainly Kelsey, it's not a great matchup, but you can roll the dice. And Jordan Reed going up against the Colts. Am I missing anybody as far as potential guys? I know you really like Jared Cook as well.
Yeah, Jared Cook's in a great spot, but when you can pick anyone you want, I mean, you're probably not going to go down to Cook, but he's in a great matchup. Kittle's probably the third. I think he's the 3rd highest projected tight end this week. Yes. So Kittle's in a fantastic spot. He also missed 2 huge touchdowns last week, and he still had a monster game. Mm-hmm. So I really like. He's in all my cash lineups. So
yeah, I think Kittle's a great play, and I'd absolutely even consider him at FantasySportsMarkets.com as well. So there you go. That's been the show, Nate. Before we say goodbye, where can people find your outstanding work?
Yeah, so you can catch me on Twitter at JayhawkChalk89, and I do a weekly column on Fantasy Insiders. I do a buy low, sell high, and then I also do a running back report column.
It's great work. He's a fantastic follow. You guys should check him out as well on Twitter and at Fantasy Insiders. Hey, thanks for spending the morning with us, man. I think you made a lot of new friends in the Twitter sphere and on Periscope as well. Good luck in week 2, and thanks for being a part of FSM Football Sunday, man. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Heis. I had a good time.
Continue to shoot us some questions on Twitter at Benny Heis at FSM Contests. Don't forget to use that promo code Homer for $10 at FantasySportsMarkets.com on us. For Nate, I'm Ben. We will talk to you guys next Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Central Time. Until then, good luck in week 2. We'll talk to you guys soon.